So Michael, you were joining us from Boodle AI. Data has come up as a topic of conversation in several of the sessions, but we haven't really zeroed in on that when it comes to segmentation. So I'm glad that we're going to round the day out with you talking about that. Will you first give our audience just a quick intro on who you are, what you do, who is Boodle AI, and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm glad that you saved the most technical concept at the very end of the day, just so I can put everybody firmly to sleep. So I already did that to my kids today while trying to teach them something. So I suppose I'll go 2 for 2. But
well, we knew everyone would just die aloud if we put you in the beginning. No, I'm kidding.
No, fair enough.
I kid.
Fair enough. But no, it's cool to be here, and thanks for having me. So, Boodle is basically, we're a predictive analytics platform that leverages existing record data or target data that you have coming out of your CRM primarily, and basically uses a bunch of third-party data points to help find what makes a good donor, right? That's the overarching simple way of looking at it. And then in terms of background, so I've kind of an interesting background in terms of it just being varied, right? The owners of the business and founders, Sean and France, like myself, are ex-Army and West Point guys. We always like to joke that we travel in small packs, right? We're like a close tribe. But in all seriousness, it's a lot of fun working with them. And I was in the Army for just about 6 years. I was in the 101st Airborne and did 2 tours in Iraq. And actually, when I got out, I went to school for a master's in math and started working as a mathematician for a big consulting firm. And after about 3 years of doing long division in a box all day, I kind of got tired of it. So I said, hey, what better than to jump into the product and services world, which has actually been super fun. And actually, just recently, I sold a company, a data science training as a service company called Data Incubator, and then invested and started up another AI SaaS product that's servicing primarily the government right now. And we got that going over the last year, but joined Sean and France and the Boodle team. I guess it was about 3 months ago. Hard to believe. It feels like it's been a year pretty much already. But really the thing that is kind of going to be the center, I think, of our conversation today, and what I can help people think through is, we hear about AI and we wonder, okay, what's kind of BS? What's helpful? Is it additive? Is it real? And the thing that was really taking me by or I was taken by in looking at the product originally when Sean and France asked me to join the team was how practical it was and how we're essentially leveraging the tabular Excel CSV type data. It's really easy, quite simply, for machines to read and make insights from. And again, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that over the course of this little chat here. But that's just the low hanging fruit for the AI product world.
Yeah, well, it is a term that's thrown around a lot, and you also said another term that can sound scary and daunting, and that's predictive modeling or predictive analytics. Earlier in the conversation of today, Jay and Bradley over at Kindful were talking about communications and how to cultivate communications. So I want to get practical and let's take this big, heavy concept of AI and first off, break down the fact that a lot of people are saying they're doing AI. What does that mean? Yeah. What does it actually mean to an organization, a fundraiser, or a marketer right now who's trying to figure out, well, how do I actually use that? What does that mean? It sounds complicated and scary. I just need to talk to the right donors at the right time about the right things.
Yeah. So, that's a great question. So ML and AI, anything that kind of markets itself as this sentient being that's able to solve all of your problems, do your homework and feed your kids, that's definitely not the type of product that you want. And really if you just break it down, I'm probably boiling it down a little too much, but I'll take a swing. The real power of AI machine learning is really in the name machine learning. You want, like, our problems, our ability to look for the right customers and donors, it's this like unremitting type need, right? We're constantly looking, and then we're constantly looking at ways to re-engage our existing donors, maybe for a different ask, a new ask, or just to keep them as recurring donors to retain them. So it's not just this one time, you get an output, you have an answer, you reach out, and you're done. So the benefit of machine learning is that as you're feeding data through a machine and you're getting these predictive insights that says, hey, you want to look for the people that are likely to give your campaign over $1,000. Okay, a Boodle AI builds a predictive product or a predictive model for you. We feed your data through that model. You get those insights segmented to where, hey, these are the people that are most likely to give. But the real value, the continuous value of what we're doing is that by taking a proper machine learning approach, if I give you a list of 50 people to call as an executive to raise, $1,000 a head, once you get the results from picking up the phone and calling those people, ultimately what you want to do is feed those results back through the machine, because that is actually teaching the machine, and the machine's getting even better at leveraging the data that it has on those human beings and giving you insights into ultimately who's really going to give. So just a real long story short, through a very, very proper process, you're going to get data each time that's better and better and better, and insights that are better and better and better, and are not kind of that one time solve my problem today and not think about the future. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And my understanding of machine learning is been similar to that, where it's you have to train your software to really be able to then make the predictions, right? And so it's called machine learning because the machine is constantly learning, and it can take some time. So, and I've had these types of conversations with different, AI platforms, or, maybe text messaging platforms that are using AI to make it seem like a human is texting you back for fundraising or whatever it is. And it is a matter of training it to understand, look for patterns, right? Would you say that? Correct me if I'm wrong in any of this.
No, you're all over it.
Yeah, look for patterns in your donors' behavior, or your supporters' behavior, or volunteers' behavior, or your peer-to-peer participants' behavior, and find those patterns to then start making those real predictions that are actually worth something. Would you say that's true?
So mostly, and actually it's true, but you bring up a really important topic to discuss, which is the first thing that you're absolutely right about is the training of the machine. So if you think about a machine, it can't just go from zero to becoming this sentient, all-knowing technology. You have to train a machine like you train a child, right? You have to teach it square, and then you have to teach it purple, and then you have to teach it square, context, right? And the machine learns from there. But in terms of gathering insights, it's easy to gather insights. It's easy to do what we would call use an unsupervised learning approach, where you have, for lack of a better way of putting it, a very simple, you have very simple idea, thesis, and you use a very powerful algorithm to try to grab insights out of thin air and cluster those insights and bring them back to you and say, hey, this is what we noticed about those general insights. That's unsupervised learning. Supervised learning is a much more valuable approach, especially for people that are trying to raise donor funds or sell product today. Because again, what you have an abundance of typically is you have past donors, right? You have people that you can use to train a machine what good donors look like, so that machine can impress upon a target list, okay, here are the things that made them a really, truly good donor. Not just looking at a handful of things about that donor, but maybe 500 or 600 things about that donor that makes them a good donor and returns some level of value. So it's just, in essence, it's the idea of training a machine versus unsupervised learning, which is, again, you take some really hot algorithm that you can use to cluster data, but it's not necessarily giving you actionable money-making insights. It might be good research, but everybody here is trying to raise money. Everybody here is trying to make money for their cause. And again, the best way to do that is to use a supervised learning approach that trains a machine and leverages simple, readable data.
Yeah. So let's talk. And I mean, you're right. You and I could nerd out on this a lot. We won't totally go crazy here. But let's talk about some practical examples of how you're seeing organizations like successfully segment and communicate in this moment, looking at the data that they have. So not everyone's going to go out and like just purchase machine learning capabilities right away, right? What are some practical examples you have for like how to understand your data and segments so that you can target the right people right now?
No, that's great. And I think this this is just like a natural build off of what we were just talking about, which is in the supervised approach, what's really important is the development officer, the human being that has some level of experience raising money in a particular form. Because basically what you need to have is you need to have kind of a thesis, right? Or you need to have an objective, which is I want to raise over $1,000 from, a series of people, right? And I have 100,000 person prospect list. So basically able to build a predictive model that valuably segments your data, you need to have a thesis, right? You need to have an idea of what you want to see. And then the next thing, and again, it's the most important thing, is if you have an idea of what you want to do, and then you have previous donors that have done those things before, that is the simplest way to do the actual segmentation. It's all driven from kind of like the gut of the development officer who has a sense for what kind of campaign they want to run, because they've raised money like that before. They just want to get better at raising that money more efficient, and do a better job at ultimately raising more funds. But this is a real tool, and this is the type of AI in the supervised learning frame that, again, it is additive to the human being. That's it. It's like adding a bunch of horsepower to the gut of an experienced development officer. Like, that simple.
I think there's some questions that have come in. Hold on, I'm going to look at the chat. Give me a second. So how does this take into account donors that have given at high levels already this year?
So
that's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. So it depends. And just to make sure I understand the question, there's two ways that you can look at this. You can say, okay, you have an existing successful like donor, someone who is given, high-level donor that's given $5,000 to your nonprofit. There's two ways to look at this. If you're asking, Bonnie, how do I look at this donor in terms of making another gift in a different campaign, how would I adjudicate that? How would I look at that? Well, again, it's not overly complicated in that they become a part of a list that's analyzed using a different predictive model. But if you're looking for additional high-value donors, that is excellent training data. So the fact that you have somebody that maybe they gave during the COVID crisis, right? This person gave during the COVID crisis. This is a perfect time to use that as training data for the machine to understand what makes essentially a good donor or high-value donor during the particular crisis, given the context of the day. So it's really, really, really powerful training data. But again, there's just kind of two ways to separate that. Bonnie, did that make sense, or did I even come close to answering your question? Because
I think I'll chime in a little bit and tap into some previous experience. I think there's a lot of different data sources that are coming at you. You likely have a CRM. He said, yeah, I just want to make sure insured donors aren't over asked. Very, very good point. So here are a couple of my thoughts on this. There's a lot of donor data that you have. Hopefully you've got a database of record, a CRM. Hopefully, going back to what Jen and I were talking about earlier with, integrations, when you're buying different platforms that are going to plug together, you're able to integrate as much as possible. Some very easy things to think about are, and as you mentioned, Michael, like recency, frequency, monetary giving, right? Like the RFM model, like that's kind of your most basic thing. But then there are other things that you could look at and take into account too. If you do get real fancy and nerd out with like machine learning and AI, their social profiles, what's their something called a clout score, which tells how social people. You might have other like wealth data tools that you use and keep, and those sorts of things can help you kind of all come together. That's where I actually think the power of AI and a platform that can do that machine learning, like puts it all together and digests it and makes a lot of sense of it. If you don't have access to that, there's other things you can do to piece it together. In looking at your CRM and stuff like that. There's probably even some people on the line here who are just like, we just use Excel, we just use Excel. What do we do? And there's all different levels of that. And so at that point, it's like, okay, well, how fancy can you get in Excel, right? And maybe think about buying some sort of a CRM that at least gives you some high level charts and ways to segment and that sort of a thing. But, start at least with the basics of the RFM model if you can. I think to really thrive in this model and to tap into authenticity, that's when you start to understand people's motivation and connection to the cause and all of that. What would you add to that, Michael?
So, I mean, this is an important, really, really important discussion. And this is, so let me take a step back. So if you think about just our general approach, the most important thing when using machine learning is that you have data that a machine can read. And I'll tell you, a lot of the big problems, like a company that I'm on the board of that I was standing up last year, Anno, is a unsupervised learning platform that is literally trying to structure imagery data and turn it into readable data for a machine. That's hard. It's really, really hard. It's going to take absolutely years to make that actual for a commercial customer. But if you consider what we use today in CRM data, the fact that we're looking at and enriching just tabular CSV Excel files, that's an amazing, amazing situation to be in, because it doesn't matter if you're taking a little bit from one tool and a little bit from another and then merging it with a tool like A and then even adding on B. You can bring all those Excel records together. And by just dragging and dropping an Excel record into a SaaS platform like ours, if you can get those insights because the machine can read them, that's a huge, huge win. And it's one of the reasons why we don't have any like super major integrations right now, because we actually just want you to do that. We want you to download like Excel, like tabular data, and just feed it into the machine, because we've spent millions of dollars making sure the machine can read tabular data. Like, that simple. So this is like a really important discussion that gets into the viability of any type of machine learning and AI, which is, even if you have like a bunch of like disparate data across systems, can you put all of it together, throw in a tool, and have that tool digest the information? If the answer is yes, because the SaaS company is created a product that's capable of doing that, then you've got something, really kind of special.
I'm unmuting myself. I'm looking at our time. Okay, we're right about at time. We've talked about some pretty complex stuff here, and just what's one takeaway? I mean, just like keeping it simple. Speaking to someone who's like, well, I just got a CRM system, or I just am doing things in Excel. What's your one tip for doing at least some basic segmentation right now to get to the right people? Do you have one thing that you would say, like, here's where you can start so that you're not overwhelmed?
Yeah. So, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Obviously, I sell a product, right? And I want to sit here and just tell you all day and advocate for that product, which my real answer would be, yeah, you need to put all this stuff in Boodle and let us turn out these insights. I think the more important thing actually is regardless of the tool that you're looking to use, if you're even looking to use a tool, there's something even more important to think about, which is like data hygiene is what I would call it, which is making sure that you have like high fidelity tabular data and that it's complete, right? That the person before you, if there was a person before you in your job, was collecting that data in a consistent and readable way, because you can't even begin to analyze data, whether it's through basic, like just segmentation where you're filtering stuff out, or using an advanced analytics tool like ours. You can't even begin to make good insight from it if you're missing values, basic values in that tabular data. Mm-hmm. And, most people laugh at me when I say this, but, running a data science like company, I'll tell you, it's unbelievable how these like little disciplines really go out the door when dealing with just even like Excel files. But it's so incredibly important in being able to use it. Again, even if you're just setting up a filter and you're trying to find a particular type of donor based on a particular field. Well, if you don't have that field filled out in Excel, you might just be skipping over that when you're filtering them out. It's that simple, but it's a pervasive problem in this space. So definitely try and build some level of process around how you input your data, basic data entry. Simple.
Yeah. Garbage in, garbage out, so whatever you're doing, garbage in, garbage out. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Despite like whatever tool you're using, however fancy you get, having clean data is important to making sure that you're then able to be as powerful with that data as you can be, even if it is just in Excel, right?
Yeah. And that is like you just said it better than I did, Taylor. That's exactly no.
I have the luxury of sitting back, hearing it, and then just like figuring out how to say it.
No, that's perfect. That's a skill I have not mastered as a loquacious mathematician who likes to freaking talk about this stuff. But that is actually really important. And then my last real bit of advice is, if anybody comes in and explains and a machine learning product in a more complicated way than I just did it on this, little production, they're probably full of crap. So just be aware, because it's not, the truth is, none of this is that hard. I mean, there's stuff that's hard in the unsupervised space, like some of the stuff I've seen there, but the stuff and the tools that people on this call should be using, there's nothing overly complicated about it. Yeah. Seriously.
Well, I think it can feel complicated and daunting if it's not your thing, but what I get excited about is that there's actually a ton of tech now that does make it easy. I'm not a math person. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a data person, but I use the tools that make it simple for me to use it. And so, I think it's out there. I think it's adopting the mindset that there's technology that has evolved where the user experience is easier than it was for sure when I got into this sector. And so there's something for everyone. That's my point, today. So there's something for everyone.
And if you look at something, like here's the real test. If you've been a development professional for years, your gut's powerful. Like human intuition is incredibly powerful. Like if you look at a tool, if you look at something and you can't say at the end of a demo or whatever that this is going to supercharge my life, then it's probably not a good fit.
Yeah. No.
Stay away.
Stay away. Yeah. Move on. Don't prioritize that. Move on to something else.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
All right. Well, hey, Michael, thank you for joining us. It's been, I hope that we didn't nerd out too much for people, but I think it's a really important conversation. And it's something that, like I said, we hear AI all the time. Like it's the sexy word to say. But it doesn't always make sense. Like what does that actually mean? So I'm glad that we talked about it today. We broke it down, and I just appreciate your time for being a part of this.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime I can dispel some myths, get me in the game.
Yeah, it looks like we have a question, which is great because this is the last happy hour where we're doing open Q&A. So we'll pivot into that. Okay, really good question. What is the minimum amount of data needed to get accurate predictive recommendations?
So Julia, it's a good question. And quite frankly, this could be like a 10-hour conversation, but just in the interest of time, if I think about, I've been on 3 months and I've probably done like 100 demos now for, prospective and existing customers. And from what I can tell from the results that I'm seeing, if you have less than 1,500, 2,000 target records, I would probably say it would be hard for not just our tool, but a comparable service to make really valuable insights out of them, given what they'll probably charge you for the tool. We're pretty cheap. Our like initial license, I think, is like $5,000, and still, my gut has told me along all these engagements, 1,500 to 2,000 records is probably the sweet spot in terms of a minimum, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Thank you. Appreciate you.
No problem.
And it's been fun. We'll stay in touch. We'll be posting this out with everything else. And if anybody wants to get in touch and learn more about Boodle AI, we'll be posting everything for all of the people who have spoken with us today on the digital hub, which will launch hopefully next week. Where can we find a link to all the content? We'll be sending that out. So our team will be getting everything up online and cut up and sliced and diced and all of that good stuff and sent out to everybody who registered. So
awesome. Well, thanks
watch
again.
your replay.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.